Joining us now in the Cougar Council room in Studio B is the voice of the Cougars, Greg Wrubell, who had an opportunity to ask Coach Young one of those questions on the mic there.
What's up, Greg?
Sprinted over.
Catch your breath.
And boy, are my arms
I
tired.
have a little bit of a shine. It's because I just ran over. But,
Hey,
yeah.
Did you go up the stairs or out the
I came up
door?
the stairs. I got the cardio in. By the way, Clayton State nickname?
The Fighting Lakers.
The Lakers. There you go, the Clayton State Lakers. Of course, I knew you would take it one more level. That's what Greg does. That's what you do. What are your initial impressions of his introductory news conference?
I love how one of the first things he did was address his guys. You know, and he said his first objective is to get these guys back in BYU uniforms, get them all back together. You know, how that was really cool to hear, and have so many of them actually there to hear it themselves. And he had just talked with them, which is also cool to know that they were there and already had they'd met virtually, but now they got to have a face-to-face. And I thought he hit all the right notes, and it was cool to see ex-coaches as well as current and former alumni being able to chat with Steve Cleveland and Dave Rose and Tim Lacombe and talk to so many former players in just a few minutes we were over there. And the word family came up a lot, right? Both the Kevin Young family and then the BYU family. And it was all coming together tonight over at the Marriott Center.
Colin Terry and Nick Robinson were there as current assistants.
Nate Austin was there as well.
Nate Austin, yep. So it's a who's who, right? What do you feel like he brings to the table that might be unique from previous head coaches, given his NBA background?
Yeah, the network. He brought up the word network. He said even he is kind of astounded at how over 20 years, just how broad the network becomes and the different resources he can tap into to create a staff. And I don't want to make any kind of predictions or prognostications or set expectations of who they might be, because I think in the end, it'll be a really eclectic group and a unique group to BYU's, maybe previous staffs. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what he pulls or where he pulls from to get that first group together.
I'll go there. I'm hoping there's someone from his NBA connections, right? And a former BYU guy, and then someone who isn't a BYU guy. Obviously, a diversity of staff would be great, but he is connected in a unique way. And I'm excited to see, and he talked about kind of his offensive mindset too, that perhaps it will pick up similar to where it was, Greg, which was a very efficient offense.
Well, it's been working that way in the NBA, for years, maybe predating the current trend in college basketball, whether, it's either at the rim or on the arc. It's kind of the way it's been. And that's kind of how BYU played this year in a lot of ways. So I think that's something that he's well used to running. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
No,
and it worked really well for BYU this past year. Yeah.
Interesting dynamic, because he is so invested in guys like Devin Booker and Bradley Beal and the Phoenix Suns, and he wants them to do well and wants to coach them well in the playoffs and everything they have going on there. But he said, we need boots on the ground here, which understandably is going to put things, what he hopes, into fast forward to find his assistant coaches. So I don't know how you balance that, but I wonder when those assistants are going to start to come into play, because he needs to rely on them while he does this with the Suns.
Pretty quickly. And he already kind of alluded to the fact that the last few days have been the treadmill he's going to stay on now. He was trying to, coach games while doing interviews with other NBA teams, and then BYU comes into the mix.
Wow.
He was talking about how he's flying around the country and then trying to, hey, I got to get back home. I got to talk with my wife face to face about this looming decision. So he's been living the treadmill, and he'll stay on it for a little while longer. But I think you're right, and I think everyone realizes getting some people with firm connections in the building working is imperative. One of the things that also struck me was just the demeanor.
Yes.
He's clearly ambitious, because he's done what he's done over 20 years. But you can sense a humility in him that helped him get to where he is and impresses people. And I loved it. I thought it was a great first impression. I said this to my family. They were over there with me, and I was like, oh man, he's so young. I mean, he's Kevin Young, but he's so young.
42.
And maybe the beard even takes a couple more years off. I don't know.
He looks a little younger.
Of course, I'm getting older too, and everyone just appears young to me. But he just looked really young, and in a fun way. I knew kind of energy, a different kind of energy, a different kind of approach to coaching basketball, and no one's ever come into this job at BYU the way he has. That makes it such a unique thing. We were talking, I think, in the office earlier today about just how young he is and comparing it to previous coaches. And you got to go back to Roger Reed
Which I can't believe Roger was actually younger
Roger was
than
actually younger than Kevin Young when Roger got the job.
That is unbelievable.
Roger came off like he was a little older, right?
So Roger technically was 41 when he got the job as the head coach. He'd been on the staff for many years, of course. And then Kevin's 42. It's kind of funny trivia.
Wild. Yeah. November 17th, 1981 is the birthday for 42 years young. Kevin Young, by the way. We still have Greg Wrubell with us as well here in the Cougar Council room. And what surprises you the most about how this all came together, Greg? Because this is atypical for BYU. It was about 4 days to lock this in. Big money, big time name, accelerated timeline. What was the most surprising factor in all of it?
Yeah, I think you guys covered it really well this morning on Sports Nation when you combine the factors of speed and timeliness and resources and quality. You know, you kind of look at them all together, how they all came together at once for this hire that's clearly deemed as very important at a very key time in this program's development. And I think it's Tom Holmoe saying there's exceptions to every rule, and this is a situation that warranted exceptions relative to the expediency of it all. Processes were still followed, but they were accelerated, and they had to be in this instance. And plus, it also helped, too, that Tom Holmoe, as he indicated with you guys today, clearly had a sense of direction. They knew exactly where they wanted to go immediately. This wasn't a wring our hands, get a group of people together, figure out what we want to do next. No, this was decision makers knowing where they wanted to go immediately, reaching out immediately and getting the ball rolling immediately. And that helped it too. There wasn't a lot of dawdling and sifting and looking through applications and resumes. Yep. It was, no, we know a guy. We've already interviewed this guy. We know what we've got. And so it was a really quick thing that helped too, that there wasn't a lot of, what do we do next? They knew where they wanted to go.
My understanding is only one interview happened, and it was the guy. They knew who the guy was.
Yeah.
Ryan Smith's role in this has been impressive. Obviously, Ryan, a guy who went to BYU, is the governor of the Utah Jazz, has contributed financially. Ryan is in the house in the Marriott Center. In fact, we were told a moment ago he was talking to Dallin Hall. There you go. And Dawson Baker. So it's important to note Ryan's influence for amazingly positive, not only connections, but financial contribution, influence has been tremendous with BYU basketball. And thank goodness Qualtrics became what Qualtrics became, because it has helped the university a ton.
And Danny was there too. And so the brain trust of the Utah Jazz are very much aligned with yeah.
What other college team has that, by the way? I don't think.
Yeah, with a school in the state, and but of course it's their alma mater, right? That's close to their hearts.
Yep.
And so it's cool to see that connection too, and also the fact that there was an NBA relationship between Kevin and Danny and the Jazz as well. They'd been through that process with him, and knew what they had in him as well. So perfect storm in a lot of ways, in a good way for BYU that this window opened when it did.
He referenced that he's been speaking with the guys. We talked about it on BYU Sports Nation this morning when we discussed the Zoom call that he had with the majority of the team. I think all but 3 players were in on that call, and that's when the Chris Paul thing came up. But then he said, I've spent time with each of the guys individually, and he's just really trying to establish those relationships. I don't know if you had an opportunity to speak with any of the current BYU basketball players, or at least get an understanding of how they're feeling, but what was your impression of the guys and their accepting of this new role?
Yeah, I said hi to a bunch of the guys tonight, but basically their presence was indicating to me that they, if they weren't all in, they were a lot of the way in with this guy already. And that was encouraging. And because, a lot of guys could have stayed away and said, I'll let my other cards play out first. And I think this felt like the team. It felt like a lot of the team was still the team, which was a pretty cool feeling, I thought.
I was encouraged, yeah. By seeing Dallin Hall there, I was encouraged with that. Now, someone may have had some plan previous to this. They had to attend otherwise. Who knows, right? Tim Davis in the house as well. There
talking with Dallin right now.
Talking with Dallin, yeah. Okay, in terms of the buzz that BYU had like a week ago, a lot of preseason top 25 buzz, Greg. Who knows what the roster is going to look like? But it feels like BYU captured some of the momentum that may have been lost when Mark Pope goes to Kentucky.
For the moment, yeah.
Colin Chandler goes.
Yeah.
Feels like BYU had recaptured sort of some positive juice in that space.
Yeah, and BYU is not alone in roster flux right now, or losing high commits. It's there's still a lot of time to create a roster for 24-25. And so if people did back off of some of those projections that came out, they could be back pretty quickly as long as BYU puts puts names to paper that look close to what they were going to get otherwise. And there's a lot of time to get that done.
Greg, we're about to wrap the show up in about 2.5 minutes. So as you give your final thoughts, what's your message to those across Cougar Nation about the future of BYU basketball and why they should be most excited?
I think Tom Holmoe, when he says position of strength, knows what he's talking about. And I think Kevin Young amplifies the strength by coming in where he was as an upper tier coach in the NBA. I mean, you could argue that they got the most qualified, member of the faith, if you will, who was available out there, and brought him to BYU. How could you have done any better than getting, a top-tier NBA assistant? And I think, too, what stands out is that he says, I think it was one of the first questions he answered, was he kind of made a decision here. I mean, the path to NBA head coach took a diversion, and the diversion was BYU. For a lot of important reasons to him and his family. So this feels like someone that garnered all of the experience you would ever want to have as a basketball mind, and all the acumen is there, and now he's going to apply it maybe somewhere he didn't think he might be, but he's now going to apply it 100% wholeheartedly to BYU basketball, and that makes Cougar Nation fortunate.
Well said. Thanks for being with us, Greg.
My pleasure,
Greg.
guys.